Hello there, everyone. Welcome to this lecture about different types of assessment and assessment tools, scaffolding tools that you can use to help your students with their reading skills. And this is tailored for students in the high school ELA division. So sometimes students may be motivated to read by having them keep track of all the diverse sorts of books they've been investigating. You can make a calendar like the one I've included here, or you can otherwise have them keep a journal, like a reading journal. Just so you know, I've had mixed success with these things. I've done something like this with grade 9s, but I've never really had a hell of a lot of success with this after grade 9, like in grade 10, 11, or 12. Maybe your kids will be different. I think that these sorts of reading logs, they find a lot more favor with younger kids. For instance, my son right now, he's in grade 4. The kids, I think the kids in his class, in him, they were reading a fair bit at a certain point, and then it seems like, Phoenix isn't really doing as much reading as he used to, and then for a while, his reading spiked, and as far as I can tell why that was is because his teacher just simply had them keep a reading log, and so he was really interested to keep track of, what he was reading, how much he was reading, these sorts of things. It was kind of an incentive for him to read. And then one of the things you can see that's really nice about this calendar system here is, when a kid records a book, you can see just visually how long it takes him or her to read that particular book. You can see the sorts of books that the student's reading too, all in one glance within a month. Which is a nice system. And then, if you're noticing that, this kid likes fantasy or this kid likes murder mysteries or whatever, you can even say, well, here's some other murder mysteries. Or, if you like murder mystery, have you ever tried this different kind of reading? Why read all murder mystery? Maybe some other kind of a book. So, these kind of reading records can be incentives for the students, but they can also be tools for you to help guide the students and get their appetite up for more reading and different kinds of reading. Here's Sally, Charlie Brown's sister. She's reading a book. "What's the matter?" says Charlie. "I have to read this book for school by tomorrow. I don't suppose you'd care to read it to me, would you?" she says to her brother. "You know how to read. Why don't you read it yourself?" asks Charlie. Well, Sally says, "Reading takes effort. I hate to do anything that takes effort." And then Charlie says, "Listening to you takes effort too, And then, or listening takes effort too, And then Sally says, "Yeah, I wasn't even going to listen." So I sometimes feel like that when I'm teaching as well. How do we get the kids to be interested in reading when reading takes effort? How do we get kids even to listen to a book being read to them when listening takes effort? Big questions, especially in high school. Well, again, one thing that I've done in the past, I actually stole this practice from my teacher when I was a little boy in grade 6. She used to do reading across Canada. She'd get a great big wall map with the Trans-Canada plotted on it. We'd all have little push pins, and she would plot our mileage. And you get 1 kilometer for every page that you read, and then once you got across Canada, there'd be a little prize of some kind. Sometimes, it might be a book, or sometimes something, I don't know. Like, I took this up with my grade 9s, and I found some success with this. I found that some kids, it really motivated them to read, others not so much. But what it does do is it holds them accountable to read each day. You have sustained silent reading each day at the end of anything that they're reading, whether it's a magazine or a manga or a book of any kind, they can fill out this mileage record, right? You get to hear them, you get to see them summarizing. You get to ask, they tell you a little bit what they liked, what they disliked, what did they learn, these sorts of things. And you can keep a record of this on hand for yourself, and you can get them also plotting their mileage out using, a little ruler that you've made or whatever. And, at the end you can have a little certificate. You can get it signed by the principal or something like this, some formal little accomplishment that says that they read their way across Canada or whatever. I used to give, what do you call it, like a gift card to chapters or something like that at the end of the Trans-Canada or whatever. So, you could do that too if you liked. But those are options. And again, I think it works well in grade 9. I didn't get around to trying it with high school kids. Limited success in some ways. The older they get, the less likely they're to buy into things. But see what you can do. Other tools and assessments to scaffold reading. You can use reading records and tools like this Read Across Canada I showed you. Here's a self-assessment tool that's designed to help struggling readers tackle books or readings that take them out of their comfort zone, right? So you can use this reflection chart here. We date it. What kind of a reading is this? So you get them to look at the genre, right? On a level from 1 to 5, how easy or difficult did you find this? What did you understand from your reading? What strategies did you use, right, when you were trying to read this text? Sometimes, especially textbooks are a hell of a mess sometimes to read, right? Because they're not really meant for human consumption. So what are some strategies, right, that you can use? Are there pictures, right? Or are there headings or subheadings? Or is there bold-faced, writing in there? Look at font size, different things like this, right? Or even using a ruler when you read to keep your eyeball on pace with where you are in the text. Different things like this, taking notes as you read. Different strategies. So, and then the date I revisited this reading, right? So, when I go back and relook at it, how much better have I become or whatever. So little journal items like this can be helpful for struggling readers. And then you can give even like a checklist of strategies that students can use while they're trying to read something that's, like a textbook. Or suppose you have them doing, some research. Maybe you're reading, Lord of the Flies, right? And you're having them investigate, secondary literature written about Lord of the Flies, and reading pedantic kind of academic work or something like that can be trying at the best of times. Here are some strategies to use for you to employ, as you wind your way through some challenging academic kind of texts. Use these and see how this works for you. So that's another thing that can be helpful. I used to do vocabulary quizzes with kids, like these mix and matches. You've probably done these as a student too. They take some time to make, right? But once you've made them, it's like, a tool in your arsenal. I used to do, one a week kind of a thing. And why did I do it? Really, I did it because I wanted to get the kids used to using the dictionary, right? Like, kids don't use real book dictionaries anymore. They even looking words up online, it doesn't seem that they really care to do that. Now, so this is one way that I tried to build their competency with looking up words, alphabetical order, that sort of thing, and with the hope that this is a way to build your word power too. How well does it increase their word power? Maybe not so much. This is probably not one of the best ways to build a child's word power, by giving them, these little Friday quizzes or something. Really, how you learn about a word is by using the word, right? And on a test or on a little pop quiz with words that you've never seen before and you'll probably not see again for a long time, maybe that isn't really teaching them so much. But it gets them, developing a skill, namely using a dictionary. Perhaps some of these words they have seen before, and then coming across them might jog something in there. And honestly, like, another reason why I like these is, it's a nice quiet activity on a Friday. Fridays are typically shorter days. They settle in. It becomes a routine. It gets them in the zone for vocabulary work. Maybe again, it's not the best way of teaching vocabulary, but it also gives you some quiet time where you can prepare yourself for the lesson which follows immediately after. So it's for your own sanity too. And these sorts of things, obviously, they're easy to assess, right? So it's up to you if you wanted to use vocabulary quizzes. I think they have some virtue. I wouldn't say that they're the best pedagogy, though. There are other ways, right? Amy Benjamin offers some suggestions, probably some better suggestions. Here's just an excerpt from a chart of hers. On the left, you have what we may think of as teaching vocabulary, and on the right, experiences that are more likely to result in vocabulary growth. So on the left, the teacher composes a list based on words that are found in class readings, right? That's so typical. We do that. That's probably not as good as where the students compose the list from readings that they want to know more about, right? Or on the left, you have the teacher requiring the students to look up words in the dictionary, like what I was doing, versus a better thing is where the students make an educated guess about a word as it's used in the context in which they find it, like a real sentence, right? Then they check their educated guess in a dictionary. So that's better. It's more constructive than the vocab quiz that I used to do. The words on the teacher's word list do not share a strong structural or semantic relationship, versus students are given related words so that they can make connections and learn words in clusters, right? So all these unrelated words on a vocab quiz, like the ones that I made, maybe that's not as good as giving them a cluster of words that are all related, and then they can see, oh yeah, this is the same way of saying this thing with a different inflection or whatever. Words are treated as individual units of meaning, right? Versus both words and phrases are treated as units of meaning. Again, so using words in context, putting them in a phrase where they can see how they're used, that's much better for vocabulary building than just dealing with words as these little isolated items that kids are supposed to somehow understand. The teacher requires that students use a word in a sentence, right? So, here's a word, look this word up and then use it in a sentence. We all do that, right? Amy Benjamin says, well, better is when the teacher requires that the students use the word in a sentence that has substance. So it's at least, say, 12 words long. It has an action in it, right? And there's some vividness here. So you give some stipulations on how to use the word. And then, you as the teacher can see, does the student definitely get and understand what this word would look like if it were used in a living context? The student's knowledge of the word is assessed based on whether or not the student gets it right on a test, right? So my quiz, for instance, versus the student's knowledge of the word is assessed based on authentic contextual use. Right? That's how we use words. That's how we understand whether words are being used properly, not on a test like my little quizzes. The body of words to be assessed is finite and identifiable, okay? Versus the body of words to be assessed is indefinite, flexible, dependent upon observable growth in the corpus of vocabulary that the student uses in speech and writing. So, a little bit less, clearly identifiable which words, a body of words. The words are more organic. They're dependent upon each student more, students' interests, students' needs, students' use, that sort of thing. Assessment criteria are clear on the left, right? On the left side, standardized and determined by the teacher. Again, this, you would say, well, that sounds like good pedagogy, right? We're ranking everything, we're listing everything, we're everything is given according to the outcomes on the program of studies. On the right-hand side, though, she says assessment criteria are less clear, not standardized, and determined by both teacher and student. She says, well, it's better when it's messier. It's better when it's less clear. It's better when there's more give and take between teacher and student. So sometimes when we think very rigidly about planning, when we think about organizing our lessons, and we think rigidly about always linking everything to the program of studies, it may be not the best way of approaching good vocabulary study. Another way, the student learns words in given form. So you break it apart. You say, this is a noun, this is a verb, this is an adjective, this is an adverb, and now we're going to learn what these things look like, right? Very nuts and bolts, very structured. You're trying to be clear as a teacher when you do that sort of thing, right? Well, Amy Benjamin says, the student learns the word morphology, how to transform it into various word classes or parts of speech. So they get one word and they learn, okay, what would that word look like as a noun? Okay, how do you use it as a adjective or a verb or something like that, right? What other words does it look like? What other words is it connected to? That's better. Student uses, on the left, the student uses the teacher's exercises to practice use of words. Such exercises might include fill in the blanks, matching columns, true and false. Again, very common ways that we organize for assessment, isn't it? Benjamin says, better than that is when the student uses self-selected graphic organizers, such as extended word maps and charts to practice use of the word. So these are all ideas that when you're thinking about how to organize, how to assess, how to formatively assess and assist students with scaffolding for vocabulary, how to do this better than just simply, a vocab quiz or something. Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with vocab quizzes, and honestly, it's a Friday. Fridays, kids aren't necessarily in the zone for, everything that you want to give them. If it's a nice little habit, it takes maybe 5-10 minutes out of a class to do. I don't honestly see a hell of a lot wrong with doing a vocab quiz. Just be aware that it's not the best pedagogically speaking. Okay. Tools for scaffolding, formative assessment for reading comprehension. A good question to ask is, why can't you just refer to the standardized test score from a multiple choice, right? If you want to do vocab, if you want to do, reading comprehension, if you want to see how well your students are doing, why not just do what, say, the province of Alberta does? They have. It's crazy. I mean, I come from Ontario. I went through school in the 70s and the 80s. And that would be ridiculous. At the time, we would never have conceived of teaching English using multiple choice. It's just ridiculous. But anyway, using multiple choice, you create a number of different multiple choice questions. You put them on the taxonomy, and you try to understand. Okay, well, how well is a student comprehending what he or she's reading based on these questions, right? So, we all make these things up. Here's just a little snippet of some questions that I made up. Why can't you just use that? Why isn't that good enough? The government seems to say it's good enough, at least summatively. Well, the answer, these tests don't factor in the importance of prior knowledge, right? And interest in their calculations. Not every kid is going to know anything about the contemplation of flowers, right? Not everybody's going to give a damn about that. Why are you testing a kid, for his or her comprehension on something that they couldn't give a damn about? Why wouldn't, if you want to really know whether or not he or she can read, give them something that's like really exciting to them or interesting to them, or find something, what are you interested? Tell me about that. And then, you're really finding out what they can comprehend from their reading. Well, of course you're going to comprehend more from something that you're actually interested in than the contemplation of flowers, right? So, that's one of the reasons why these kinds of tests suck, ladies and gentlemen. But yet they drive, the tail wags the dog in education, and I can't see any time that it's going to stop wagging the dog. So, an obscure reading like this on a test isn't the same thing as reading the latest Harry Potter book, right? That the student already has a history with and much interest in. Also, much of the time we teach reading comprehension in Alberta, we tend to use multiple choice format to do so, out of concern that our students learn how to master these sorts of grueling tests. And in order to teach or familiarize them with reading comprehension test-taking techniques, we focus our efforts on assessing and improving student reading comprehension through the multiple choice format. Honestly, out in the field, when I was doing field instruction, going and visiting student teachers in their placements, over half the time in lots of the high school classrooms that I saw, all they were ever doing was taking reading comprehension tests. This is how you study poetry, is by doing multiple choice. It's ridiculous. But that is the tail wagging the dog, and it's just, this is what everybody does. It's acceptable. If an administrator walks in and they see that I'm preparing the kids for their excellence and for high stakes testing, and so that their GPA's up there, nobody's going to come at me. So, you could see how there's a kind of a logic to the way that we assess for reading comprehension most often in schools. And if you try to go against the grain, you take flack for it lots of times. Anyway, but although teaching students to deal with reading comprehension using testing forms mandated by government-sanctioned assessors may be helpful, multiple choice testing for comprehension is not the only way to help students. What I'm saying, in other words, is don't not do it just to say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to, do what the man tells me to do. No, it's good. The kids will appreciate being taught how to take a test. That's a valuable thing to know. But just don't do it all the time, for God's sake, right? Is multiple choice testing appropriate as a means to gauge understanding of literature? That's a big question to ask. So, likely, and this is just me, likely the best way to improve one's reading comprehension is simply to read, right? To read more, to read different sorts of things, to read things that take us out of our comfort zones, right? So, I would have daily readings, we'd be reading Hamlet, for instance, right? Or we'd be reading, some Kurt Vonnegut novel or something like that. Or maybe a short story, right? And then we'd talk about that, and we do some reading comprehension around that, and some activities around that. Daily readings like this, but alongside of that, as alternatives or as ways to make up for maybe times that students didn't do a good job on a thing, or they struggled with a thing, I'd give them lots of different sorts of alternative readings, little short readings that are equivalent and maybe, of a different frame, or they have a different aspect to them. Not everybody's a fan of Shakespeare, but gosh, some kids really like animals, right? So giving them an article or giving them a passage out of a book all about the inner life of animals, right? And then they could read about that, and that might really entice them. Or, something from, here's one, Plato's Phaedrus, right? A little tale about the chariot soul. And then, student who's interested in psychology and is, taking, grade 11 or 12 personal psychology, they're like, wow, that sounds a lot like Freud. Well, yeah, that's because Freud ripped that off from Plato and, botched it and changed it around, and now Well, why do you know? Well, because you've read broadly in Steele's class, right? And you've only done this because the opportunity was given you that I, as the teacher, went through. I selected a bunch of challenging readings, a bunch of different sorts of readings. I gave you a series of reading comprehension questions to guide your reading and your thought processes as you encountered those readings. This is, in my view, one of the best ways of getting kids to read more, to read different kinds of things, and, in a roundabout way, improve their reading comprehension. So, there's different sorts of techniques and tools that you can use, too, for reading comprehension. Amy Benjamin offers a list of 5. One of them is called the 5 easy questions. It tests for fluency, right? Fluency being reading with speed, accuracy, and expression. So here the teacher selects a random page or two from a text in current use and reads it, timing himself or herself, right? So I'd read this thing, read it, at a slow pace to simulate the rate of a student who'd be reading it for the first time. Then I compose, 5 basic comprehension questions that span that page, right? Then I ask students to read the passage and time themselves, and then answer the questions without looking back at the story, and list words from the story that are unfamiliar to them. Okay, this is just a simple process. Then you, as the teacher, you take that stuff from the kids and you analyze the results on a chart, right? So which of my students need additional support to read this text independently? So you've got one column for students who can, read significantly slower. You've got another column for the ones who read at an average speed. And then you've got another column for kids who this is just, a cakewalk, right? So this is something that you can do, that will help you decide, where students' reading abilities are. You can tailor-make your reading program or make good suggestions for reading based upon, which column you find the student falling into in the high school, okay? Another thing we can do is obviously reading aloud. I always read aloud to my students in class. Kids dig that. Honestly, sometimes I found kids, when you get them, when you have an activity for them, or when you're trying to engage them in some kind of a discussion or whatever, sometimes, they're a little bit boisterous. They're unfocused. On a day like that, when you find your students not having a lot of focus, I don't know why it is, but for some reason, reading aloud to kids is one of almost like a surefire way that you're going to get more kids paying attention to a text than they would in any other way. And then, when you're reading aloud, you can stop and you can ask them questions and these sorts of things. What Benjamin here is talking about, though, isn't you reading aloud. It's having them read aloud to you in a little teacher-student conference, right? So you look for fluency when they're reading to you. You pay attention to their pauses and their pitch, right? You see, how are they doing? You look for, how are they breaking? How are they code breaking here? How are they deciding what a word means or what a word is, right? How are they what strategies are they using in order to understand the things that they're reading? So this is valuable. You can do this, during a work period. You can, just like you would if you were an elementary school teacher, right? You'd call the students up to your desk, or you'd go around and you'd talk with them. Maybe there'd be an area in your room. That doesn't happen so much at the high school level, but, you could easily have these little mini conferences with students, particularly the ones that you're concerned, with their reading skills or whatever. These close exercises. So what is a close? It's just basically you take a passage, right? Hopefully you get a passage that's kind of interesting. I just stole this one from Benjamin again. But you take a passage and then you blank out, so many words every so often throughout the passage, and the kids decide, okay, well, what word fits in that particular blank. You can even have a word bank below the passage, so that this word bank includes all the words that are blanked out, and it just helps them with their vocabulary. It helps them understand what words mean and this sort of thing. So there's also a thing called a C test. Rather than deleting every 5th or 10th word, you delete the latter half of every second word, leaving the first and last sentence of the passage intact. In a C test, you don't supply a word bank or multiple choice. So, these things can help, right? Try it. See whether it works for you. See whether it works for your students. It's a tool in your arsenal. Another thing, recognizing accurate paraphrases. So if you comprehend a passage, right, you should be able to explain it in your own words. In this exercise, you, the teacher, supply 4 different paraphrases of a passage the students have read, and they pick which one is correct. All right, so again, a little bit more preparation on your part to prepare these different paraphrases, but it's good. Then what did you just read? What's the best paraphrase of it? And then you can see how well did they pay attention, how well did they understand what they just read, how well can they assimilate or rather analyze a brief passage of reading. And then summarizing too, have students summarize what they just read. So by grade 9, mostly every kid can summarize the hell out of things. Like with some exceptions, of course. But summary is a basic skill that, in my experience anyway, kids come to high school basically having figured out. The challenge I find personally at the high school level is that that's all the kids ever have done. They figure, if I can summarize, then I know the story, right? Well, no. Summary is just kind of really low-level comprehension. What about, being able to analyze? What about being able to synthesize? What about being able to evaluate or critically reflect, right? These are things sometimes when you have the kids do it in high school. In fact, not just sometimes, very often, it's like a deer in the headlights, ladies and gentlemen. They've never had a lot of experience with it. They look at you sometimes like they don't know what that means. So it's good for you to start considering too, not just summary. Summary is important, and summary is probably very important, is particularly when you've got someone who's struggling, or someone, say, who's even new to the language, who needs to, tackle English language understanding and comprehension. But, that's a starting point. Probably the biggest challenge you'll have as a high school English teacher is to get beyond summary. Okay, so thanks for listening today to this brief lecture on some strategies for developing your students' reading through formative assessment. I hope that was helpful to you. The next lecture will concern the use of student portfolios.